with me. I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out, die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's be free with Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out, die with my own doubts. Be free.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited to be here. If you don't know me, my name's Therese Calvird and you can find me at Everything Lost in Paper. And I had a lot of fun in my class today. I hope you had a chance to see it. It's easy watercolouring, so ways that you can do really easy watercolouring on cards. And you can use your, let me just show you my cards. So these are the cards that I did, and I've just used ink, like dye ink, to do these two techniques. Anyone can do it because I know people freak out when it comes to watercolouring. So I had, I think I just used some Altenew inks for this one, like this sort of a style. And if you're not sure if something is a dye ink or a pigment ink, or it's usually written on the back, whether it's water-based, and typically a dye ink will be water-based, but you could use like any kind of dye ink. This is a slightly different, Catherine Pooler, they have like a different, they're made differently, and they actually have like a soft pad, which is unusual for a dye ink, but they still work exactly the same, and distress inks are perfect for these as well. So if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to put them out there. I was going to show you that I actually made 3 cards when I was mucking around with these panels, and I just wanted to show you another version. This one's like, it's a little bit similar to this. I did the smushing technique, and this is done on watercolor cardstock, so it grabbed the color more. I used deeper colors, and I used a black ink. It just makes it look different, same but different. Oh, Becky's got a question. Can't wait to try your card, Therese. At first I was unsure, but I kept watching, trusting the process. Exactly. It's not if you just do it step by step, you can do this. I promise. It's not hard. I made sure of that. But, you know, I mean, there are things that you can muck up, but, you know, it's only a piece of paper. If it mucks up, it mucks up. Mary Beth, hello from Surprise, Arizona. I've watched many videos of yours in the past, and you have such a beautiful technique, but I've been too scared to try as I'm not a painter. So watercolors scare me a bit. And you are not on your own there. You don't have to have all the things to be able to get that watercolor look, because I think because I was doing sympathy cards today, and I just think doing a light, like these light style backgrounds is it's just more in tune when you're making a sympathy card. But you could definitely make these cards in really bright colors as well, and going the wrong way. and make them like fun birthday cards instead. Probably wouldn't use these as sentiments, although Caring Thoughts could be all right for a birthday card. Diane says she's a newbie to stamping. What brand die cut machine does everyone use? Well, sometimes it's what you can get, because I live in Australia and we can't always get all the things here. And I used like a manual. I still like a manual die cutting machine, but I also have an electric die cutting machine. But you kind of only really, if you're newbie, I wouldn't be going down that track. Just start with what you can find, what works for you. A Sizzix Big Shot or the Platinum 6 from Spellbinders. I've just moved across to using that, and I'm really enjoying it. The Platinum 6 gives a really nice cut, and it comes with everything you need, silicone mats, everything. You don't have to go out and buy any extras with that one. Joe Williams has got a question. Do you have a specific set of brushes you prefer to watercolor with? Now, not really. I do have a variety of brushes. I started watercoloring with one of these. You've probably seen these water well brushes. It's the ones that you add the water into the well, and then you've got just a synthetic brush tip on them. And theory is that it will run the water out as you pick up the paint, the watercolor. It will pick up the paint and add the water, but I never liked that. I didn't feel like I had enough control, so I would always just leave the well dry and just dip it in the water, add it to the paint, and then put it on the cardstock that way. Cheap brushes can work just as well, except that sometimes if they're very cheap, you'll find that you'll end up with loose hairs and things coming onto your projects. I mean, they do brush off. It's not the end of the world. I've got a few obviously I'm on the Alter New Design team. I've been with them for 14 years, I think now. So I have a lot of Alter New stuff, which I've collected over the years. So I like their brushes. They work really well. And I did buy some fancy ones. There's these black velvet silver ones a few years ago. If I'm going to do like watercoloring and like use things like tube paints or things like like paint palettes and things like that, then I'll tend to grab the better brushes. If I'm using inks, I don't think it really makes any difference, but I tend to use the cheaper brushes when I'm using watercoloring with dye inks. I don't think it would harm them, but I don't know, in my brain. Or the other thing you can get are pre-filled. These are like the water brushes, but they're pre-filled with color. And there's a few different brands of these. Or, I forgot to grab it, you can actually get this liquid in little bottles and use it as watercolor. It's BB Cameron just released a set that I have a video on my YouTube channel where only a couple of months ago, and it's amazing. So I don't know, are we able to, I think I'll better link, if just in case you don't know where I am, I'm going to put a link up, please, for my YouTube channel. So you can find me at Lost in Paper at YouTube. So there's lots of different ways to add watercolor, but no specific brushes, something mid-range. If you're a newbie, you can certainly start with something like a water pen or just a cheap brush, because you don't want to overinvest in something if you don't like it too much. But if you're finding that you're doing a lot of colouring and you want to get those fine lines and things, then the better brushes do make a difference when it comes to that. I feel like I'm talking really fast. Claudine, yes, I saw your question in the Facebook group too. And I'm not sure if you've had a chance to watch the video, excuse me, but Claudine was asking a really good question, is like how to stop the paper from getting curly. I find if I use a lot, so start with the paper itself, I suppose. If you use a better cardstock, like a better watercolor cardstock, something that's built to tolerate water, you'll find that you'll have less chance of it curling. So I have a variety. If I'm making cards, I usually like to use a nice bright white, and the Ranger, they have a really good cardstock which is bright white, and one side's very smooth and the other side has a texture, so you can get that textured look if you want, or you can stamp on the smooth side, and that's really tolerant of water. I also use Altenew have their own watercolor cardstock, which is quite a bright white as well. And I find any of these, like the cold press and hot press, the difference between that is cold press, see the difference in that, how you might not be able to see it so well under the light, but it's quite a cream color, which can look really pretty too. But the cold press has a textured side, and the hot press typically, I'm going to say the wrong thing, that's a cold press, I haven't got a hot press here. The cold press ones have the texture. Hot press papers tend to be a bit smoother and easier to stamp on. So if you use a better quality cardstock, that's one of the ways to stop the warping to begin with. Bristol Smooth is not technically a watercolor cardstock, but it's nice, smooth and bright white, but it tolerates water really well. I've used that for years as well. But the other thing is not to add too much water if you can help it, or when you're adding layers, allow a layer to dry and then come back rather than heaping on the water all at once. If it does warp, I did share a technique that I use all the time in my video where I sandwich the, I just get some regular copy paper, fold it over. Sometimes I add a shim. I'll just put my panel in the middle of that and then run it through a die cutting machine, and that just flattens it out. Sometimes you need to do it a couple of times, or you can do the old school way and sit it under some really heavy books. That does work, definitely. And speaking of paper, this is the paper that I used in the video, which is actually cardstock, but it tolerates water really well. You can also use it for Copic colouring. You can use it for ink blending. It's not the best to pencil colour on, although I have used it for that as well. But that's the colour. It's a really bright white. And that's a Nina colour white. Can you tell I'm a bit weird about the whites? But yeah. So Claudine, check out my video and see how I did that in the video. Joe's got a question. Do I prefer cold or hot press? So typically, because I'm a stamper, I will go for the hot press because it's easier to stamp on. But nowadays, with our stamp positioning tools that we have available, it's actually become so much easier because you can restamp. But in the olden days, you only had one go. And unless you stamped in black, where you could kind of touch it up with a watercolor tolerant marker, so then I'd use something like, could fill in the gaps of the black. So if you're just using a block to stamp and it doesn't stamp properly and you want a watercolor, then you can actually draw in the bits that missed stamping with one of these. But if you've got a stamp positioning tool, it's easier because you can just restamp. And pigment inks, if you are going to stamp and colour with watercolour, you can't stamp, or you can stamp with dye inks, but they're going to bleed. So you're much better off to either use a pigment ink, or another great idea is if you are new and you're worried about the colours bleeding, then heat emboss. So create a well, and that way you can paint in each petal, and the water is not going to seep across to the second petal, because when you're typically watercolouring, you're not going to colour each petal beside each other, because they'll still be wet and the colour will draw and you won't end up with the variations. Which I did have another question on. Sandy wanted to know, she has trouble getting the colour too light or too dark. So I'll just quickly say, Rebecca wants to know if media paper would work as well as watercolour paper. Yes, you could certainly, if you've got that, use what you've got. And the thing is, you can try what you've got. I've even watercoloured on just Nina cardstock, mostly with my pencils, Inktense pencils, which so you're really not using much water at all, but it works. But yeah, so so to get colour too light or too dark, just one thing to remember is it's always going to dry lighter. It's like a Copic. When you're colouring with it, over time, as it's drying, it's going to look lighter. So it does pay to go a little bit darker than you want to, or the other option is to let it dry and just allow yourself the time to do layers instead. I always keep a bit of scrap paper, watercolour cardstock, just like an edge off to the side, and then I can, as I'm mixing my colours on a palette, then I can just pick it up and put it on the scrap cardstock beside me, and I'll see whether it's what I want. I can always make it darker before I commit it to my project. Any other questions? Distress oxide. It does react with water. I don't use distress inks pretty much at all anymore. I've got a few oxide inks. They're more technique-driven inks though. But yes, they give a really cool look. They're almost like a gouache look because they've got that chalk background, and gouache is just like almost like a chalky paint. So you're going to get something similar, but they do react with water, so you could definitely paint with them, but you might lose the edges of your stamped image. So if you've put it in a stamp positioning tool, which is what I normally do, I leave the stamp. That's why I have more than one. No, it's not. It's just because I'm greedy. But you can always restamp over the top of the distressed ink because you don't want to lose those sharp edges. Tracy, I did talk about paper warping. Oh yeah, so she just heats both sides back and forth and it flattens. That works too, but I'd use a low setting on a heat tool. If you've got a heat tool that, excuse the noise. So this heat tool here, they're called, if you're going to get a heat tool, I would recommend one that has a high and a low setting. So this one, you can turn it up high to do heat embossing, but the low setting is awesome. You can set pigment ink so you can color quicker. You don't have to wait a couple of minutes. You can also use it to dry cardstock. And if you wanted to do embossing over inked areas, you can dry it. It's amazing how much you'll use that low setting. And Claudia was saying, when you are making a bunch of cards ahead of time to keep using watercolor, do you have them stored in a certain way? So do you mean after they're painted, Claudine, or is it the actual watercolor like on the palette? If it's the palette paint, I just let it dry out and then I'll re-wet it with the brush and pick it up and use it. That's one of the great things about watercolors is they don't really get wasted. And if you do have some left over on a palette or a mat, you can always just grab a piece of cardstock and smush it round and create a background panel. And I did do a smushing technique in this video. I showed the one with the acetate, but I did want to mention there's another way that you can do it, which looks like it works really well, rather than, because you can end up with lines a little bit with the acetate, is you can get a bag, like a plastic bag, and put something like paper towel or something screwed up inside it and tie it off at the top, and it's going to give you like a flat base that you can dab into the paint. And then I've seen people do that where they add like this smushing, so they lift up the ink with this plastic round bag, almost like, you know, when you have an ice pack on a sore head, it's that sort of thing, and then you can just lift that over and drop that on your cardstock. Terry, how long can finished cards be stored? Oh, I've got some I've had for years. And if you use good adhesive, I've just done a video on adhesives. I actually did a basic video because I'm a little bit addicted to adhesives. But if you don't use good adhesive, they can fall apart. If you're going to give it away and it's going to be gone sooner rather than later, then it won't matter. But if you use good adhesive, it will last a long time. Oh, gosh, I've just babbled for 20 minutes. I'm so glad that you joined me. I do hope you get a chance to watch my class if you haven't already, and give it a try. It really is quite easy to do, and share it at the Facebook group. You can find me at Lost in Paper. I've got a blog. I've on YouTube, Facebook. Did I say Facebook? Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. So glad that you joined me here today. Enjoy the rest of the summit. I'll see you there. Bye.